Hegel's Philosophy of Mind, subsection A, Anthropology, the Soul, subsection A, the Physical Soul, already read, Alpha, Physical Qualities, and Beta, Physical Alterations, now Gamma, Sensibility, beginning at Encyclopedia section 399. Sleep and waking are primarily, it is true, not mere alterations, but alternating conditions, a progression in infinitum. This is their formal and negative relationship, but in it the affirmative relationship is also involved. In the self certified existence of waking soul, its mere existence is implicit as an ideal factor. The features which make up its sleeping nature, where they are implicitly as in their substance, are found by the waking soul in its own self, and, be it noted, for itself, the fact that these particulars, though as a mode of mind they are distinguished from the self identity of our self centered being, are yet simply contained in its simplicity in what we call sensibility. Encyclopedia section 400. Sensibility, sensibility, feeling, is the form of the dull stirring, the inarticulate breathing of the spirit through its unconscious and unintelligent individuality, where every definite feature is still immediate, neither specifically developed in its content, nor set in distinction as objective to subject, but treated as belonging to its most special, its natural peculiarity. The content of sensation is thus limited and transient, belonging as it does to natural immediate being, to what is therefore qualitative and finite. Everything is in sensation, feeling. If you will, everything that emerges in conscious intelligence and in reason has its source and origin in sensation. For source and origin just means the first immediate manner in which a thing appears. Let it not be enough to have principles and religion only in the head. They must also be in the heart, in the feeling. What we merely have in the head is in consciousness, in a general way. The facts of it are objective, set over against consciousness so that as it is put in me, my abstract ego, it can also be kept away and apart from me, from my concrete subjectivity. But if put in the feeling, the fact is a mode of my individuality, however crude that individuality be in such a form. It is thus treated as my very own. My own is something inseparate from the actual concrete self, and this immediate unity of the soul with its underlying self in all its definite content is just this inseparability, which, however, yet falls short of the ego of developed consciousness and still more of the freedom of rational mind life. It is with a quiet different it is with a quite different intensity and permanency that the will, the conscience, and the character are our very own, then can ever be true of feeling and of the group of feelings, the heart. And this we need no philosophy to tell us. No doubt it is correct to say that above everything, the heart must be good. But feeling and heart is not the form by which anything is legitimated as religious, moral, true, just, etc., and an appeal to heart and feeling either means nothing or means something bad. This should hardly need enforcing. Can any experience be more trite than that feelings and hearts are also bad, evil, godless, mean, etc.? That the heart is the source only of such feelings is stated in the words, "From the heart proceed evil thoughts, murder, adultery, fornication, blasphemy, and such things." In such times when scientific theology and philosophy make the heart and feeling the criterion of what is good, moral, and religious, it is necessary to remind them of these trite experiences, just as it is nowadays necessary to repeat that thinking is the characteristic property by which man is distinguished from the beasts, and that he has feeling in common with them. Encyclopedia, section 401. What the sentient soul finds within it is, on one hand, the natural immediate, as ideally in it and made its own. On the other hand, and conversely, what originally belongs to the central individuality, which, as further deepened and enlarged, is the conscious ego and free mind, get the features of the natural corporeity, and is so felt. In this way, we have two spheres of feeling, one where what at first is a corporal affection, ergo of the eye or of any bodily part whatever, is made feeling, sensation by being driven inward, memorized in the soul's self centered part, another where affections originating in the mind and belonging to it are in order to be felt and to be as if found invested with corporeity. Thus, the mode or affection gets a place in the subject. It is felt in the soul. The detailed specifications of the former branch of sensibility is seen in the system of the senses. But the other are inwardly originated modes of feeling, no less necessarily systematize themselves and their corporate and their corporization as put in the living and concretely developed natural being works itself out, following the special character of the mental mode in a special system of bodily organs. Sensibility in general is the healthy fellowship of the individual mind in the life of its bodily part. The senses form the simple system of corporeity specified. A. The ideal side of physical things breaks up into two because in it, as immediate and not yet subjective ideality, distinction appears as mere variety, the senses of definite light. See section 287 from the encyclopedia, and of sound, section 300 of the encyclopedia. The real aspect, similarly, is with its definite double, b. the senses and smell and taste, sections 321 and 322 of the encyclopedia. C. the sense of solid reality, of heavy matter, of heat and shape. Around the center of the sentient individuality, these specifications arrange themselves more simply than when they are developed in the natural corporeity. The system by which the internal sensation comes to give itself specific bodily forms would deserve to be treated in detail in a peculiar science, a psychical physiology. Somewhat pointing to such a system is implied in the feeling of the appropriateness or inappropriateness of an immediate sensation to the persistent tone of internal sensibility, the pleasant and unpleasant, as also in the distinct parallelism which underlies the symbolical employment of sensations, ergo of colors, tones, smells, but the most interesting side of a psychical physiology would lie in the study not of mere sympathy, but more definitely the bodily form adopted by certain mental modifications, especially the passions or emotions. We should have, ergo, to explain the line of connection by which anger and courage are felt in the breast, the blood, the irritable system, just as thinking and mental occupation are felt in the head, the sense, the center of the sensible system. We should want a more satisfactory explanation than hitherto of the most familiar connections by which tears and voice in general, with its varieties of language, laughter, sighs, with many other specializations lying in the line of pathognomy, uh, pathognomy, 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 and physiognomy. So again, we should want a more satisfactory explanation than hitherto of the most familiar connections by which tears and voice in general, with its varieties of language, laughter, sighs, with many other specializations lying in the line of pathognomy and physiognomy, are formed from their mental source. In physiology, the viscera and the organs are treated merely as parts subservient to the animal organism, but they form at the same time a physical system for the expression of mental states, and in this way they get quite another interpretation. Encyclopedia section 402. Sensations, just because they are immediate and are found existing, are single and transient aspects of psychic life, alterations in the substantiality of the soul, set in its self centered life, with which that substance is one. But this self centered being is not merely a formal factor of sensation. The soul is virtually a reflected totality of sensations. It feels in itself the total substantiality which it virtually is. It is a soul which feels. In the usage of ordinary language, sensation and feeling are not clearly distinguished. Still, we do not speak of the sensation, but of the feeling, sense of right, of self, sentimentality, sensibility is connected with sensation. We may therefore say sensation emphasizes rather the side of passivity, the fact that we find ourselves feeling, in essence, the immediacy of mode in feeling, whereas feeling at the same time rather notes the fact that it is we ourselves who feel. Subsection B, the feeling soul, soul as sentiency, de Fulende Cell. Fulende Cell. Encyclopedia section 403. The feeling or sentient individual is simple. The feeling or sentient individual The feeling or sentient individual is the simple ideality or subjective side of sensation. What it has to do, therefore, is to raise its substantiality. It's merely virtual feeling up to the character of subjectivity, to take possession of it, to realize its mastery over its own. As sentient, the soul is no longer a mere natural, but an inward individuality, the individuality which in the merely substantial totality was only formal, yet has to be liberated and made independent. Nowhere so much as in the case of the soul, and still more of the mind, if we are to understand it, must that feature of ideality be kept in view, which represents it as the negation of the real, but a negation where the real is put past, virtually retained, although it does not exist. The feature is one with which we are familiar in regard to our mental ideas or to memory. Every individual is an infinite treasure of sensations, ideas, acquired lore, thoughts, and similar things. And yet the ego is one and uncompounded, a deep, featureless, characterless mind in which all this is stored up without existing. It is only when I call to mind an idea that I bring it out of that interior to existence before consciousness. It is only when I call to mind an idea that I bring it out of that interior to existence before consciousness. Sometimes in sickness, ideas and information supposed to have been forgotten years ago because for so long they had not been brought into consciousness once more come to light. They were not in our possession, nor by such reproduction as occurs in sickness do they for the future come into our possession, and yet they were in us and continue to be in us still. Thus, a person can never know how much of things he once learned he really has in him. Should he have once forgotten them, they belong not to his actuality or subjectivity as such, but only in his implicit self. And under all the superstructure of specialized and instrumental consciousness that may subsequently be added to it, the individuality always remains the single souled inner life. At the present stage, the singleness is primarily to be defined as one of feeling, as embracing the corporal in itself, thus denying the view that this body is something material, with parts and outside the soul. Just as the number and variety of mental representations is no argument for an extended and real multiety in the ego, so the real outness of parts in the body has no truth for the sentient soul. As sentient, the soul is characterized as immediate, and so as natural and corporal. But the outness of parts and sensible multiplicity of this corporal counts for the parts and sensible multiplicity of the corporal counts for the soul. Again, as sentient, the soul is characterized as immediate, and so as natural and corporal. But the outness of parts and sensible multiplicity of this corporal counts for the soul, as it counts for the intelligible unity, not as anything real, and therefore not as a barrier. The soul is this intelligible unity in existence. The existence speculative the existence speculative principle. This in the body, it thus in the body, it is one simple, omnipresent unity. As sentient, the soul is characterized as immediate, and so as natural and corporal. but the outness of parts and sensible multiplicity of this corporal counts for the soul, as it counts for the intelligible unity, not as anything real, and therefore not as a barrier. The soul is this intelligible unity in existence, the existent speculative principle. Thus, in the body, it is one simple, omnipresent unity. As to the representative faculty, the body is but one representation, and the infinite variety of its material structure and organization is reduced to the simplicity of one definite conception. So, in the sentient soul, the corporeity and all that outness of parts to parts which belongs to it is reduced to ideality, the truth of the natural multiplicity. The soul is virtually the totality of nature. As an individual soul, it is a monad. It is itself the explicitly but totality of its particular world, that world being included in it and filling it up. And to that world it stands but as to itself. Encyclopedia section 404. As individual, the soul is exclusive and always exclusive. Any difference there is, it brings within itself. What is differentiated from it is as yet no external object, as in consciousness, but only the aspects of its own sentient totality in such things. In this partition, judgment of itself is always subject. Its object is its substance, which is at the same time its predicate. This substance is still the content of its natural life, but turned into the content of the individual sensation laden soul. Yet, as the soul is in that content still particular, the content is its particular world, so far as that is, in an implicit mode, included in the ideality of the subject. By itself, this stage of mind is the stage of its darkness. Its features are not developed to conscious and intelligent content. So far it is formal and only formal. It acquires a peculiar interest in cases where it is as a form and appears as a special state of mind. See Encyclopedia, section 350, to which the soul, which has already advanced to consciousness and intelligence, may again sink down. But when a truer phase of mind thus exists in a more subordinate and abstract one, it implies a want of adaptation, which is disease. In the present stage, we must treat first of the abstract psychical modifications by themselves, secondly, as morbid states of mind, the latter being only explicable by means of the former. Alpha, the feeling soul in its immediacy. Encyclopedia, section 405, and Alpha Alpha. Though the sensitive individuality is undoubtedly a monadic individual, though the sensitive individuality is undoubtedly a monadic individual, it is because immediate, not yet as itself, not a true subject reflected into itself, and is therefore passive. Hence, the individuality of its true self is a different subject from it, a subject which may even exist as another individual. By the selfhood of the latter, it, a substance, which is only a non independent predicate, is then set in vibration and controlled without the least resistance on its part. This other subject by which it is so controlled may be called its genius. In the ordinary course of nature, this is the condition of the child in its mother's womb, a condition neither merely bodily nor merely mental, but psychical, a correlation of soul to soul. Here are two individuals, yet in undivided psychic unity, the one as yet no self, and yet nothing impenetrable, incapable of resistance. The other is its actuating subject, the single self of the two. The mother is the genius of the child. For by genius we commonly mean the total mental selfhood, as it has existence of its own and constitutes the subjective substantiality of someone else who is only externally treated as an individual and has only a nominal independence. The underlying essence of the genius is the sum total of existence, of life, and of character, not as mere possibility or capacity or virtuality, but as efficiency and realized activity as concrete subjectivity. If we look only to the spatial and material aspects of the child's existence as an embryo in its special integuments, and as connected with the mother by means of umbilical cord, placenta, and so on, all that is presented to the senses in reflection are certain anatomical and physiological facts, externalities and instrumentalities in the sensible and material, which are insignificant as regards the main point, the psychical relationship. We ought to be noted What ought to be noted as regards this psychical tie are not merely the striking effects communicated to and stamped upon the child by violent emotions, injuries, and the like of the mother, but the whole psychical judgment partition of the underlying nature by which the female, like the monocotyledons among vegetables, can suffer disruption in twain, so that the child has not merely got communicated to it, but has originally received morbid dispositions, as well as other predispositions of shape, temper, character, talent, idiosyncrasies, and similar things. Sporadic examples and traces of this magic tie appear elsewhere in the range of self possessed conscious life, say between friends, especially female friends with delicate nerves, a tie which may go so far as to show magnetic phenomena between husband and wife, and between members of the same family. The total sensitivity has itself here in a separate subjectivity, which, in the case cited of the sentient life, is the total sensitivity has itself here in a separate subjectivity, which, in the case cited of the sentient life in the ordinary course of nature, is visibly present as another and a different individual. But this sensitive totality is meant to elevate its selfhood out of itself to subjectivity in one and the same individual, which is then its indwelling consciousness, self proposed, which is then its indwelling consciousness, self possessed, intelligent, and reasonable. For such a consciousness that merely sentient, for such a consciousness, the merely sentient life serves as an underlying and only implicitly existent material, and the self possessed subjectivity is the rational, self conscious, controlling genius thereof. But this sensitive nucleus includes not merely the purely unconscious, congenital disposition and temperament, but within its enveloping simplicity, it acquires and retains also, in habit as to which see later, all further ties in essential relationships, fortunes, principles, everything in short belonging to the character and whose elaboration self conscious activity has most effectively participated. The sensitivity is thus a soul in which the whole mental life is condensed. The total individual under this concentrated aspect is distinct from the existing and actual play of his consciousness. His secular ideas, developed interests, inclinations, and similar, as contrasted with this looser aggregate of means and methods, the more intensive form of individuality is termed the genius, whose decision is ultimate, whatever may be the show of reasons. Intentions, means of which the more public consciousness is so liberal. This concentrated individuality also reveals itself under the aspect of what is called the heart and soul of feeling. A man is said to be heartless and unfeeling when he looks at things with self possession and acts according to his permanent purposes, but be they great, substantial aims or petty and unjust interests. A good hearted man, on the other hand, means rather one who is at the mercy of his individual sentiment, even when it is of narrow range and is wholly made up of particularities. Of such nature of goodness of heart, it may be said that it is less the genius itself than the indulgere genio, which can be translated as the indulgent demon, or the demon of indulgence, who causes you to indulge others. Desire. He is of good nature because he wants something. Encyclopedia 406, beta beta. The sensitive life, when it becomes a form or state of the subconscious, educated, self possessed human being, is a disease. The individual in such a morbid state stands in direct contact with concrete contents of his own self, whilst he keeps his self possessed consciousness of self and of the causal order of things apart as a distinct state of mind. This morbid condition is seen in magnetic somnambulism and cognate states. In this summary, encyclopedic In this summary encyclopedic account, it is impossible to supply a demonstration of what the paragraph states as the nature of the remarkable condition produced chiefly by animal magnetism, to show, in other words, that it is in harmony with the facts. To that end, the phenomena, so complex in their nature, and so very different one from another, would have first of all to be brought under their general points of view. The facts, it might seem, first of all call for verification, but such a verification would, it must be added, be superfluous for those on whose account it was called for they facilitate the inquiry for themselves by declaring the narratives, infinitely numerous though they be, and accredited by the education and character of the witnesses, to be mere deception and imposture. The a priori conceptions of these inquirers are so rooted that no testimony can avail against them, and they have even denied what they had seen with their own eyes, in order to believe in this department, which in order to believe in this department, even what one sees with these eyes, or, if you like, in order to believe in this department, even what one sees with these eyes, and still more to understand it, the first requisite is not to be in bondage to the hard and fast categories of the practical intellect. The first requisite is not to be in bondage to the hard and fast categories of the practical intellect. The chief points on which the discussion turns may be here given. Alpha. To the concrete existence of the individual belongs the aggregate of his fundamental interests, both the essential and the particular empirical ties which connect him with other men and the world at large. This totality forms his actuality, in the sense that it lies, in fact, immanent in him. It has already been called his genius. This genius is not the free mind which wills and thinks. The form of sensitivity in which the individual here appears immersed is, on the contrary, a surrender of his self possessed, intelligent existence. The first conclusion to which these considerations lead, with reference to the contents of consciousness in the somnambulist stage, in that it is only the range of his individually molded world, of his private interests and narrow relationships which appear there. Scientific theories and philosophic conceptions or general truths require a different soil, require an intelligence which has risen out of the inarticulate mass of mere sensitivity to free consciousness. It is foolish, therefore, to expect revelations about the higher ideas from the somnambulist state, from a state which causes you to reason, except in very in cases. Not going. Beta. Where a human being's senses and intellect are sound, he is fully and intelligently alive to that reality of which gives concrete feelings. Where a human being senses and where a human being's senses and intellect are sound, he is fully and intelligently alive to that reality of his which gives concrete feelings, FILLING, to his individuality. But he is awake to it in the form of interconnection between himself and the features of that reality conceived as an external and a separate world, and he is aware that this world is in itself also a complex of interconnections of a practically intelligible kind. In his subjective ideas and plans, he has also before him this causally connected scheme of things he calls his world, and the series of means which bring his ideas and his purposes into adjustment with the objective existences, which are also means and ends to each other. At the same time, this world which is outside him has its threads in him to such a degree that it is these threads which make him what he really is. He too would become extinct if these externalities were to disappear, unless by the aid of religion, subjective reason, and character, he is in a remarkable degree self supporting and independent of them. But then in the latter case, he is less susceptible of the psychical state here spoken of. As an illustration of that identity with the surroundings may be noted the effect produced by the death of beloved relatives, friends, and so on those left behind, so that one dies or pines away with the loss of the other. Thus, Cato, after the downfall of the Roman Republic, could live no longer. His inner reality was neither wider than higher than it. Compare homesickness and the like. From this paragraph, in the previous one, we hear to be in the world and to be of the world and to be liked by the world and to care to be liked by the world is to seek the mean at the moment, the popular idea, and to be along with it. And if one does this, one will exist in a very calm state of mind. Even if, so if everyone is against a war, and you then, having no idea about it, are also against it, you'll be in a state of calm. Hopefully, you don't say very much about it. You just say what everyone else is saying. If you are, if everyone is attracted in your community to a particular type of woman or a particular type of male, then be attracted to that type of woman or male. And then you also will live a life that is very calm. Um, the repercussions of it uh, are, then this is where thought comes in. A repercussion could be that to like a particular type of woman or male, to be uh, in support of a war or against it, could be what they call a sonnenblonik, an event that is caused by a greater entity, a government, or another secular body for the purposes of, let's say, national unity or market or other concern. These are considered valid concerns for the entities that promote them. And those who go along with them do so, uh, it seems, out of disregard for themselves and regard for the whole. But in truth, and this truth is just the truth, they seek to gain from it the psychical feeling of belonging. There's no critique in that. This next paragraph, beta, says that with religion, and religio means a binding, a group of people who've come together for a purpose. And for Hegel, this would have been the great tradition, the tradition going back, at least in this case, to Plato and Aristotle, back to Pythagoras, and before that to Mintu and even greater scholars, or even scholars who were older. They're going down continuously up to himself, and let's say today, uh, Pope Francis the First, who is a biologist and also the head of the Roman Catholic Church. These people all follow. They may do it differently, but they follow a model of morality that if one were to follow it, you could learn the reason why the state or another large entity is causing everyone to prefer to be against a war, to prefer a particular type of male or woman, or to prefer a certain type of music. You can learn why and make an active decision on what you want to do, and you will likely be called uh, uncooperative or antisocial. And those are true. You are uncooperative with the majority if you find that the reasons why these are happening are against, let's say, the great tradition that goes all the way back thousands of years, at least to 9500 BC or further, if you can find that information. And you may also lose, at least this paragraph is stating, the ability to be in reference to other people, to be sympathetic, to be emotional. And so to regain those feelings, which are part of the natural system as much as eating and drinking and expelling are part of our system, to regain those feelings, which seem, again, if you're the type of person who's within the tradition, which is sometimes and maybe even often antisocial, if you want to feel again, if you want to be sympathetic again, especially with your family or your nation or your race or your university, certain events happen. For instance, like the death of a loved one, or the marriage of a child, or some other events. Oftentimes, the church, the Catholic Church, or within the Jewish tradition, or others will have these milestone events so you can, in your group, and maybe even in a larger group, come back to feeling. So you can go to work, say you're antisocial, according to this philosophy, you don't follow the crowd, but you know someone who gets married and you appreciate that. You know someone who dies. You are unhappy that your country has lost the war, and so are many other people. These are all things that can bring you back into unity with the larger group, hopefully long enough that you aren't exiled from the group, which in a human societal understanding is not useful. Even if you were to create your own group. The United States is the most recent example of a people, theoretically, who exiled themselves from Europe, and many others have come from other places in the world to create something new. But those people also follow the great tradition in how they put it together, and they also participate in propaganda and other things to bring the nation together as one. So if you follow if you choose to be antisocial, make sure you know that there are opportunities to reconnect with society at landmark events like births and deaths and weddings and football games and war. These are times where you can step back in and then feel comfortable, if this is you, stepping back out again according to the tradition. And he also shows that religion is useful if followed according to the letter and the law. You do what's said, understanding that this is according to a tradition. So if you are emotionally Catholic, Roman Catholic, for instance, you may have a great unity within your faith tradition. But if you are legalistically Roman Catholic and you have the intellect to be, you'll find that you are led accordingly to certain understandings that place you within a rhythm that is very, very old, as old as 2,800 years, if not older, that humans have been in for some time. So you'll find that your sentimentality, your sentiment, uh, becomes connected to something much older than the sentiment of maybe following a football game. These are ultimately choices. The easiest choice is to go with the majority and to be a part of the majority and enjoy your life, your 85 years on earth. Though, if you find yourself to be antisocial or otherwise, with this tradition, if you hear Hegel and you think, I kind of want to be uh, the way he's describing is the better way to be, assuming that's what you hear, then you need to find opportunities to reconnect with the greater whole through rites, through maybe fraternity rites, or again, weddings and funerals and births, uh, football games, uh, an opinion about a war in a place that you don't know anything about. So you just go with the majority feeling about it. All of these are things to consider. And there are times when, even if you are antisocial, it may be better to practice silence in the face of the current social movement, because the harm to your individuality, to your ability to follow the tradition, that harm to you can be greater than really is necessary. And this is when religion says things like, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or anyone who wants, anyone who follows God or follows the tradition will find themselves shaken and there's all these laments to kind of, again, put you emotionally back in play with the tradition. All of these are meta, well, in this case, meta philosophy of mind, meta psychology, to let you know why you think the way you do. And then it becomes easier, I think, to step back down into a majoritarian or a traditional, which is necessarily elitist operation, and then re sympathize within them before stepping out again.